The monitor screen reflected in my glasses as I made the final adjustments to the quarterly report. My slender, manicured fingers flew confidently across the keyboard. At 67, I had retained a clarity of mind and professional acumen that even the younger employees at Meridian Finance envied. I adjusted a silver strand that had slipped out of my strict bun and checked the figures once more. 28 years in financial analysis had taught me to see the story behind every column of numbers. Investments were like human destinies, with ups and downs, periods of stability, and unexpected twists. I appreciated the predictable orderliness of numbers. Unlike people, they never lied or disappointed. Mrs. Torrens, Rachel, a young assistant with perpetually tousled hair, peeked into the office. "Mr. Lawrence asked me to tell you that the meeting has been moved to 2:30 and he really wants you to be there. Thanks, Rachel." "Tell him I'll be there," I nodded, without taking my eyes off the screen. When the door closed behind the assistant, I allowed myself a moment's respite. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the photograph in a simple silver frame, the only personal decoration in my austere, functional office. In the picture, little Everett was holding his first coin from the collection we had started together. His smile, with his missing front tooth, always warmed my heart. 8 years. Tomorrow, my only grandson would be 8 years old. I frowned, remembering that I hadn't picked up his present from the store yet. I'd have to stop by after work today. At first, I wanted to buy Everett another game console or something trendy that boys his age were talking about, but then I decided to stay true to our shared hobby. My phone vibrated on the table. A message from Meredith. "Don't forget, the party starts at 6 sharp. Don't be late." No please or thank you. I suppressed a sigh. When did my daughter turn into this cold, always-in-a-hurry woman? After lunch, I left the office building and headed to Brown's Numismatic Gallery, a small specialty shop a few blocks from work. The bell chimed melodiously as I entered the cool room, which smelled of old books and metal polish. "Ah, Mrs. Torrens!" Oliver Brown, the elderly owner of the shop, greeted me with a smile. "Your order is ready. A real treasure, I must say." He pulled an elegant wooden box with brass hinges and a lock from under the counter. "I hope your grandson likes it. It's not every day you meet a young collector with such good taste." I smiled, remembering how I had brought Everett here for the first time 3 years ago. He was only 5 then, but he already showed remarkable observation skills and an interest in details. While other grandmothers took their grandchildren to amusement parks and ice cream parlors, I showed Everett the world of numbers, stories, and collections, and the boy absorbed it with a delight I no longer saw in my own daughter's eyes. "This is a set of rare Civil War coins, as you requested," Oliver continued, opening the box and displaying the neatly arranged coins in velvet pockets, plus an album with historical notes and space for new additions. I gently ran my finger over the dull metal of the century-old coins. "It's perfect, Mr. Brown. Everett will be thrilled." After paying and exchanging a few more pleasantries with the owner, I stepped outside. The summer heat of Dallas hit me as soon as I left the air-conditioned store. I carefully placed the box in my bag and headed back to the office, wondering how my family would react to my gift. Florence, Garrison's mother, and Everett's paternal grandmother would probably curl her lips and whisper something like, "Those old coins again? A boy needs normal, modern toys." And Meredith, my own daughter, would just smile awkwardly and later ask me in the kitchen, "Mom, maybe next time you should ask me about the gift. Florence thinks you're imposing your old-fashioned hobbies on Everett." I smiled bitterly. There was a time when Meredith and I were best friends. After Ronald died, when Meredith was only 12, we banded together against the world. I worked 2 jobs to pay for her tuition at a prestigious college, and Meredith lived up to my expectations, smart, beautiful, ambitious, until she met Garrison Peyton. The Peyton family belonged to the kind of Texas society that looked down on people like me. Despite my professional achievements and financial independence, to them I was still a commoner, not sophisticated enough to be part of their circle. And Meredith wanted so badly to be accepted that she gradually began to see me through their eyes. At first, it was little things. Meredith started correcting my speech, suggesting different clothes, apologizing to my new relatives for my simple habits. Then she began to limit our communication, especially in the presence of my husband's family. And after Everett was born, it was as if a wall had grown between us. Florence thinks the child needs a routine. The Paytons prefer traditional parenting. It's not customary in their family. These phrases became constant companions in our conversations, and only when Florence was away on her charity events or social tours did Meredith allow me to take my grandson for the weekend. When I returned to the office, I found Sheldon Bright, the gray-haired CFO I had worked with for almost 2 decades, in my office. "I didn't think you were leaving for lunch," he remarked, rising from the visitor's chair. "You usually eat that sad salad of yours right at your computer." "I had to pick up a present for my grandson," I explained, placing my bag on the desk. "It's his birthday tomorrow." "Oh, the little financial genius?" Sheldon smiled. "How old is he?" 8. "A wonderful age. My grandchildren live in Portland, and I only see them on holidays," Sheldon said with a hint of sadness in his voice. "By the way, I came to discuss your resignation." I tensed up. 2 weeks ago, I had submitted my retirement papers, and I had been waiting for this conversation every day since. "Lawrence asked me to talk you out of it," Sheldon said bluntly. "You're our best analyst, and no one understands investment trends better than you." "Sheldon, I'm 67, I reminded him gently. "Even numbers need to rest sometimes. And what are you going to do? Knit socks and bake cookies?" He snorted. "I know you, Jeanette. You'll go crazy with nothing to do after a month." I walked over to the window and looked out at Dallas spread out below, the city where I had lived my entire life. "Maybe," I admitted, "but I want to be able to spend more time with Everett, to see him grow up. Ronald didn't live to see Meredith, and I don't want to miss a moment with my grandson." Sheldon came over and stood next to me, our reflections overlapping in the window pane, 2 elderly professionals whose lives had been devoted to numbers and graphs. "You know," he said quietly, "when Elizabeth died, I thought work was the only thing that would save me, and it really did help me stay sane. But over time, I realized I'd missed so many moments with my daughters. Now they're grown up and living their own lives, and I can't get those moments back. I don't want Everett to remember me as the busy grandmother who only shows up on holidays with a check in an envelope," I admitted. "Then maybe you're making the right choice," Sheldon nodded. "But let me give you some advice from an old financier. Don't leave completely. Ask for part-time work, a consulting role. It will be like a safety net for your budget and for your sanity." I smiled gratefully. Sheldon was probably the only person in my circle who understood me without words. Sometimes I wondered if there could have been something more between us, but we were both too absorbed in our work and family commitments to explore the possibility. "I'll think about your offer," I promised. "Now I have to finish this report for the meeting." Sheldon nodded and headed for the door, but paused in the doorway. "And Jeanette, don't let your daughter's sister-in-law get to you. You're worth more than all of their Texas pedigrees put together." When the door closed behind Sheldon, I returned to my computer. Work had always been my refuge, a place where I felt in control and confident. Here I was treated with respect, my opinion was valued, and people listened when I spoke. Not like in my daughter's family, where my presence was barely tolerated and my words were disregarded. The phone rang, interrupting my train of thought. My daughter's name lit up on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. "Yes, Meredith?" "Mom, did you forget about the check?" My daughter's voice sounded tense, as it always did when money was involved. "What check?" I really didn't understand what she was talking about. "Everett's school fees." Meredith's voice took on a note of irritation. "You promised to help with the fall semester. Florence says St. Joseph's raised their tuition." I mentally counted my savings. The private school Florence had chosen for her grandson cost a fortune, but I never refused to help, even if it meant cutting back on my own expenses. "Of course I remember," I lied. "I'll bring it tomorrow for the party." "Great," Meredith said, relief evident in her voice. "And Mom, Florence ordered a nautical-themed cake, so please don't wear anything blue. She wants everything to match in the photos." I looked at the new blue suit I had bought especially for the party. Typical Florence, finding ways to control even the smallest details. "Okay, honey. Anything else?" "No," Meredith hesitated. "Just don't be late. You know how important punctuality is to the Paytons." After the call, I stared at my phone for a long time, then looked at the photo of Everett smiling. For him, I was willing to endure my daughter's coldness and Florence's contempt. For his smile and the excitement in his eyes when he opened the box with a new coin for our collection. For those rare moments when we could just be grandmother and grandson, without judgmental glances and snide remarks. I opened the desk drawer and took out my checkbook. Tomorrow, I would face another test as a not good enough mother and grandmother. But right now, I had a meeting, numbers and graphs, a world where I always felt at home. I parked my old Volvo at the end of a long line of expensive cars lined up along the driveway to the Payton house. My car, which had served me faithfully for 12 years, looked out of place among the gleaming Lexuses, BMWs, and Mercedes-Benzes. It was as if I didn't belong among these people. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I checked my appearance one last time. Instead of the blue suit I had originally planned to wear, I chose a beige ensemble. Elegant but not flashy. A safe choice, as Florence would say. With an internal sigh, I grabbed my gift bag and checkbook. The check for Everett's private school was already written, a 5-figure sum that had significantly depleted my savings. But I never begrudged spending money on my grandson's education, even if the Paytons took my help for granted. The Payton Mansion was located in the most prestigious neighborhood in Dallas, a 3-story, snow-white colonial-style building with a manicured garden and a fountain in front of the entrance. Every time I climbed the marble steps to the massive front door, I felt like a little girl from a poor neighborhood who had accidentally wandered into the world of the rich and successful. But today, I wasn't here by accident. I was here for Everett. The front door was opened not by Meredith, as I had expected, but by a maid hired for the holiday, dressed in a uniform and white apron. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Who are you here to see?" she asked with a slight Spanish accent. "I'm Jeanette Torrens, Everett's grandmother," I replied, trying to hide my hurt at not being recognized. "Oh, of course, please come in. The guests are gathering in the backyard." I walked through the spacious hall, whose walls were decorated with family portraits of the Paytons, all perfectly matched, with perfect smiles and impeccable posture. There was not a single photograph of me among them, not even one where I was with Meredith or Everett. It was as if my existence had been erased from the history of this family. As I passed the living room, I heard Florence's familiar voice on the phone. "Yes, Victoria, everything is ready for the reception. Come over, it'll be a small family celebration, nothing special." She noticed me and paused. "I'll call you back later." Florence Payton looked like she had just stepped out of the pages of a high society magazine. Her silver hair was perfectly styled. She wore a pearl necklace and a cream-colored suit by a famous designer. At 72, she retained her regal bearing and sharp gaze that seemed to notice every imperfection in those around her. "Jeanette," she said in a tone that mixed greeting with surprise, "you're early. We weren't expecting guests until 4. "It's 3:45, Florence," I said, trying to sound calm. "Meredith asked me not to be late." "Really?" She glanced at her expensive watch. "How time flies. Well, since you're here..." Her gaze slid over my outfit. "Interesting choice of suit. So, practical. At your age, it must be difficult to keep up with fashion." I swallowed the barb, as I had done hundreds of times before. "Where's Everett? I'd like to congratulate him before the other guests arrive." "In his room. Garrison is teaching him how to tie a bow tie for the formal part. You know how important details are." Florence paused. "You can leave your gift on the table in the hall with the others. And the check. I hope you didn't forget?" "No, Florence, I didn't forget," I said, taking out the envelope and handing it to her. "I hope it's enough for the semester." She took the envelope with her fingertips as if afraid of getting it dirty, and without opening it, put it in her jacket pocket. "Meredith said you've decided to retire. A wise decision at your age. Although I can't imagine what you'll do. You've always been so absorbed in your work." Her words hinted that it was my busy work schedule that had caused Meredith to drift away. It was an old, painful reproach that Florence skillfully wove into every conversation we had. "I have plans," I replied cautiously, "and yes, one of them is to spend more time with Everett. Oh, Florence arched her perfectly shaped eyebrow. But you do realize that the boy has a very busy schedule. Tennis, piano lessons, French. The Paytons have always valued a well-rounded education. Before I could reply, there was a rush of footsteps on the stairs, and Everett came bounding into the hall, dressed in a miniature suit with a bow tie that made him look like a little gentleman from another era. "Grandma Jeanette!" he exclaimed, rushing toward me with open arms. I bent down and hugged him tightly, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and that special, unique freshness that only children have. "Happy birthday, my little financier," I whispered our special password in his ear. Everett giggled and pulled away, his blue eyes, inherited from his father, shining with joy. "Did you bring me a present?" he asked with childlike directness. "Everett!" Florence scolded him sternly. "What did we say about manners?" "I'm sorry, Grandma Florence." The boy immediately wilted. "I meant to say I'm very happy to see you, Grandma Jeanette. Thank you for coming to my birthday." This little scene hurt me deeply. I saw how quickly the sparkle in my grandson's eyes faded under the stern gaze of his other grandmother, how natural childish joy gave way to rehearsed mechanical phrases. "Why don't you show Grandma Jeanette how we decorated the backyard?" suggested Florence, clearly wanting to get rid of us both. "Just don't get your suit dirty, dear. The photographer will be here any minute." Everett nodded and took me by the hand, leading me through the house to the glass doors that opened onto the terrace. "Grandma, I missed you so much," he said in a completely different tone as soon as we were out of earshot of Florence. "Did you really bring me a new coin? Can I see it now?" "Quiet, little financier," I smiled. "We need to find a quiet place." The Paytons' backyard, the size of a small park, had been transformed into a marine kingdom. Garlands in the shape of starfish and seashells hung everywhere. Tables were decorated with arrangements of blue and turquoise flowers, and in the center stood a three-tiered cake decorated with figurines of sea creatures. The service staff bustled about, setting out glasses and laying out cutlery. Everett and I found a secluded spot under an old oak tree with a wooden bench. "Here," I said, taking a box out of my bag and handing it to him. "Be careful." Everett's eyes widened with delight when he opened the lid and saw the collection of coins. "Wow, are these real Civil War coins?" he whispered reverently. "Yes," I nodded. "See this one? It was minted in 1863 when the Battle of Gettysburg changed the course of the war. Why is this one so worn?" "Because it's been through a lot," I explained. "Imagine how many people have held it in their hands, what stories it could tell if it could talk." Everett looked thoughtfully at the coin. "Grandma Florence says you should throw old things away and buy new ones. Only poor people keep junk." I felt a wave of anger rising inside me, but I held it back. "You know, Everett, some things only get more valuable with age, like good wine or books with wisdom or memories," I said, gently running my hand through his hair. "Real treasures aren't always the things that shine the brightest." "Like coins?" he asked. "Like coins," I agreed. "And like the time we spend with those we love." Everett looked at me intently with his unchildlike, serious eyes. "I love our time together, Grandma, even more than coins." My heart ached with tenderness and bitterness at the same time. How little I was allowed to see him, and how precious those rare moments were. "Me too, sweetie. Me too." Our moment was interrupted by the voice of Meredith, who appeared on the terrace in an elegant blue dress that perfectly matched the nautical theme of the party. "There you are, Mom. I didn't even know you were here," she said, a hint of annoyance in her voice. "Everett, the guests are starting to arrive. Go say hello to the Whitmore family." "But Mom, Grandma Jeanette just gave me an amazing coin collection," the boy exclaimed, holding up the box. Meredith shot me a quick glance that said she was not pleased. "That's very nice, Mom, but Everett, now is not the time. Put that in your room and come downstairs, and don't forget to thank Grandma Jeanette." "Thank you, Grandma." "It's the best present ever." Everett hugged me tightly and ran into the house, clutching the box to his chest. When he was out of sight, Meredith turned to me. "Mom, we talked about this. Florence thinks you're encouraging an unhealthy interest in money." "It's not an interest in money, Meredith. It's an interest in history," I argued. "And since when is Florence's opinion more important than your son's happiness?" Meredith tensed, and I saw the expression that had become so familiar to me over the past few years appear on her face, a mixture of defensiveness and humility. "Let's not start, okay? It's Everett's birthday, and I don't want any drama," she said, nervously adjusting her hair. "Garrison invited some important clients with children. Just be yourself, but not too much, okay?" Without waiting for my response, she headed toward a group of guests who had just entered the garden. I remained alone on the bench, feeling even more like a stranger than when I had first stepped into the house. Gradually, the garden filled with guests, immaculately dressed men and women with perfect hairstyles and practiced smiles. The children, mostly Everett's classmates from private school, looked like little copies of their parents, reserved, well-mannered, and dressed in expensive clothes. I watched this spectacle from the sidelines, sipping champagne handed to me by a passing waiter. No one approached me, although several people cast curious glances in my direction, clearly wondering who this elderly woman in a modest beige suit was. Everett, like a true little host, moved from guest to guest, politely thanking them for their gifts and answering questions about school. I saw Florence proudly introduce him to her friends. "Our little heir." Our, not mine. As if Everett had only one family, the Paytons. Garrison, my brother-in-law, a tall man with receding hair and a slightly forced smile, noticed me and nodded from afar but did not approach. In all the years we had known each other, we had never developed a warm relationship. He treated me with the same polite aloofness he treated the waitstaff. Not rude, but without a hint of genuine interest or sympathy. Time dragged on. I found myself counting the minutes until I could politely excuse myself. But suddenly, a young man with a camera appeared beside me. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said politely. "Mrs. Payton has asked all the guests to proceed to the central lawn for a group photo." I got up and headed toward the spot where the guests were already gathering. Florence, standing in the center of the composition, gave orders like a general on a battlefield. The Whitmores on the right, the Bridges on the left, children in front. "Garrison, you and Meredith stand next to Everett. Mom, come here." She gestured to her elderly mother, but not to me. I stood awkwardly to one side, not knowing where to stand. Everett noticed my indecision and waved me over. "Grandma Jeanette, come join us." But before I could take a step, Florence gently but firmly intervened. "Everett, dear, we're taking a family photo right now. Grandma Jeanette will be in the next picture with her friends." I froze, feeling the heat of embarrassment rise to my cheeks. A family photo. Without me. The grandmother of their only grandson. A flash of confusion crossed Everett's face, but under Florence's stern gaze, he didn't dare to argue. Meredith gave me an apologetic look, but said nothing. Garrison didn't even seem to notice what had happened, and I stood to one side, watching the camera click, capturing Everett's real family, without me. After the photo session, all the guests were invited to the tables set up on the lawn. I found my name on a card in the far corner, next to some elderly woman who was probably Garrison's aunt, and a family I had never seen before. Not at the main table where the Paytons, my daughter, and Everett were sitting, but on the periphery like a second-rate relative who had been invited out of politeness. I slowly sank into a chair, feeling the familiar bitterness rising in my throat. Over the years, I should have gotten used to this kind of treatment, but every time it hurt as much as the first. The elderly lady who introduced herself as Agatha, Garrison's aunt, gave me a once-over. "You must be Meredith's mother," she said, sipping her white wine. "Yes, I'm Jeanette Torrens," I replied, trying to smile. Agatha drawled. "Florence mentioned that you work in a bank, I believe." "In a financial company," I corrected her. "I'm a senior financial analyst at Meridian Finance." "Oh, how interesting," Agatha said, clearly not finding it interesting. "That must be very engaging for a woman of your age." "I love my job," I replied simply, deciding not to rise to the provocation. Of course," she nodded. "Not everyone has the opportunity to devote themselves to family and community service. Florence, for example, heads 3 charitable foundations and always finds time for her grandson. But everyone has their own priorities." I felt my fingernails digging into my palms under the table. How many times had I heard these insinuations? How many times had I been accused of depriving Meredith of a normal childhood and now preventing me from being a real grandmother to Everett? None of them knew what it was like to be widowed at 35 with a small child to raise. No one understood that it was my busy job that paid for Meredith's college and was now helping with Everett's education. The waiters began to serve the first course, an exquisite cream of seafood soup. I mechanically raised the spoon to my mouth, but the food tasted bland. My gaze kept returning to the main table, where Everett sat between Florence and Meredith, and across from them sat Garrison and some important business partner with his son. "Excuse me," I apologized to my table mates and stood up. "I'll be back in a minute." I headed for the restroom, needing a break from the tension. As I passed the main table, I heard Everett's ringing voice, and my grandmother, Jeanette, taught me how to tell the year a coin was minted by looking at the tiny details. It's like detective work, only real. "Everett, dear, don't shout at the table," Florence gently reprimanded him. "And let's not talk about old coins today. It's not the most appropriate topic for a holiday dinner." "But Grandma Jeanette says that every coin has a story and—" "Everett," Garrison interrupted, "listen to Grandma Florence. Why don't you tell Mr. Caulfield about your tennis success?" I slowed my pace, watching my grandson's face change from excited to reserved, like a little adult. My heart sank. They had methodically eroded everything that connected us: curiosity, a passion for history, the ability to see value in simple things. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection for a long time. The wrinkles around my eyes had deepened in recent years, and there was more silver in my hair. But there was still the same fire in my eyes as there had been 30 years ago, when I, a young widow, vowed to do everything I could to give Meredith the best life possible. And here was the result: my daughter sitting at a table with people who didn't even consider me worthy of their company. When I returned, the main course was being served: tuna steaks with some kind of fancy side dish. I forced myself to eat a little, though every bite was difficult. Agatha continued her monologue about the importance of family traditions, which seemed to be directed exclusively at me. I nodded in the right places, but my mind was far away. My gaze often lingered on my daughter. Meredith looked flawless: an elegant dress, perfect hair, a restrained smile. But there was something else in her face, a kind of tension, as if she was constantly controlling her every movement, every word. I remembered her differently: laughing until she cried at silly jokes, arguing with me until we were hoarse about books and movies, dancing in the kitchen in her pajamas. Where had that Meredith gone? The one who had challenged the entire college by writing a feminist essay at a conservative institution? The one who dreamed of changing the world? After dessert, some kind of complicated mousse cake that I barely touched, Meredith came over to my table. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked quietly. "You haven't eaten anything." "I'm fine, sweetie," I lied. "I'm just not very hungry." Meredith sat down next to me, and for a moment I saw something of my former daughter in her eyes, a glimmer of concern, sincerity. "I know this isn't the most comfortable situation for you," she said, lowering her voice, "but you understand how important this is for Garrison. His business partners are here, his clients—" "I understand," I nodded. "I'm trying not to get in the way." "No, Mom, that's not it." Meredith fidgeted nervously with her napkin. "It's just, Florence worked so hard on the party, and she's so sensitive about the details. You know how she can be." "Oh, yes, I know exactly how she can be," I said, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. "Mom, please." Meredith's eyes flashed with alarm. "Let's not do this today, for Everett's sake." I took a deep breath, holding back the words that were threatening to spill out, always for someone else. For Meredith's sake, I had kept quiet when Garrison first brought her to his parents' house, and Florence had pointedly removed the family silver from the table. For the sake of their marriage, I hadn't objected when I wasn't invited to the family Christmas in the first year. For Everett's sake, I put up with Florence taking the lead in everything concerning her grandson's upbringing. "Of course, dear," I said, taking her hand. "For Everett's sake." Meredith smiled gratefully, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. She quickly kissed me on the cheek and returned to the main table, where Florence was engaged in lively conversation with the guests, occasionally casting appraising glances in my direction. Soon it was time for the ceremonial presentation of the holiday cake. The waiters brought in a 3-tiered marvel of confectionery art, decorated with fondant sea creatures and 8 candles. All the guests gathered around, and Everett was placed in front of the cake. He looked a little embarrassed by all the attention, but his eyes sparkled with delight at the sight of the impressive dessert. "Before Everett blows out the candles," Florence announced, raising a glass of champagne, "I would like to say a few words." The guests fell silent. Florence, impeccable in her cream-colored suit with a string of pearls around her neck, looked like a queen addressing her subjects. "8 years ago, our family was blessed with the arrival of this amazing boy," she began, placing her hand on Everett's shoulder. "From the first day I held him in the delivery room, I knew he was special. The real Peyton, smart, noble, with an innate sense of dignity." I stood to the side, clutching a glass of champagne that tasted sour. "Yes, I was also at that hospital on Everett's birthday. I spent 16 hours with Meredith during labor, holding her hand as she screamed in pain. But when the baby was born, Florence was the first to hold him. She insisted on it, and the exhausted Meredith didn't object." "Over the years," Florence continued, "we have all poured our hearts, our values, and our time into Everett. We wanted to give him the best education, instill noble manners, and introduce him to the best families in Dallas." She paused and looked around at the gathering. "And today I want to thank everyone who has been with us all these years, who has supported us and helped raise Everett to be a true gentleman." Her gaze fell on me, and a faint smile appeared at the corners of her lips. "Everyone, except for one woman who, unfortunately, has always been too busy with her numbers to truly participate in her grandson's life." There was silence. I felt the blood drain from my face and then rush back in a hot wave. Some of the guests exchanged embarrassed glances. Others lowered their eyes. Garrison coughed and took a sip of wine. Meredith froze with a look of horror on her face. And Everett turned and looked straight at me, his blue eyes wide with confusion and alarm. "But enough of that." Florence smiled again, as if she hadn't just uttered the most humiliating words of my life. "Let's raise our glasses to our wonderful Everett, to his bright future, which I am sure will be worthy of the Peyton name." The guests raised their glasses and offered their congratulations. Meredith, as if awakening from a dream, quickly came over to me. "Mom, I'm sure she didn't mean it," she whispered hurriedly. "You know Florence, she just—" "No, Meredith," I interrupted her in a quiet but firm voice. "That's exactly what she meant, and it's not the first time she said it. She just doesn't usually say it in front of guests." "Please don't go," Meredith said, fear flashing in her eyes. "Everett will be upset." "Look around you, Meredith," I said, gesturing toward the other guests. "Everett is surrounded by people who love him. The Peytons, a real family, as Florence says. He won't even notice I'm gone." I put my glass on the nearest table and headed for the house. Behind me, I heard cries of, "Make a wish," and "Blow out the candles," followed by applause. I didn't turn around. The hall was quiet and cool after the hot summer day outside. I stopped at the table with family photos. Garrison and Meredith on their wedding day, Everett as a baby in Florence's arms, the Peyton family together at Christmas. And not a single photo of me. How many years had I put up with this? How many times had I swallowed my hurt, pretended not to notice the neglect, the humiliation, the open contempt? All for Meredith, who wanted so desperately to be part of this family. All for Everett, whom I loved more than life itself. But today, something inside me broke. Maybe it was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Or maybe I was just tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being tolerant. Tired of being the other woman who didn't fit into the Peyton family's perfect picture. I took a set of keys out of my purse. Among them was the key to Meredith's house. She had given it to me years ago when they first moved in so I could come over any time. But with each passing year, there were fewer and fewer reasons to use that key. The last time I had come unannounced was when Everett was 5, and I had received such a cold reception from Florence, who had accidentally been visiting, that I hadn't dared to return. I looked at the key, feeling its weight in my palm. It symbolized a connection that no longer existed, trust that had evaporated, a family that was no longer mine. Slowly, as if performing a ritual, I placed the key on the table in the hall. It clinked softly against the glass surface, a small metal object that once meant so much. I left the house without looking back, closing the door quietly, without making a sound. The sun was still shining outside. Birds were singing somewhere. The world hadn't changed because Jeanette Torrens had finally decided to stop being a doormat. I walked to my car, feeling the massive Peyton house behind me, from which sounds of merriment were coming. At that moment, I realized that I felt neither anger nor even much bitterness, only fatigue and a strange, almost forgotten feeling of freedom. I walked down the street, slowly moving away from the Peyton mansion. Each step was difficult, as if invisible weights were tied to my feet. The handbag I was clutching seemed impossible to lift, even though it contained almost nothing: my wallet, phone, apartment, and car keys. My daughter's house key was no longer there. I had left it on the table in the hallway as a symbolic gesture of separation. The July heat was gradually subsiding, but I still felt stuffy. I unbuttoned the top button of my blouse and took a deep breath. The air smelled of cut grass and expensive flowers, which were planted throughout this elite neighborhood. Such a clean, neat world, where every lawn was perfectly trimmed, every tree was cut with a ruler, every house looked like a picture from a glossy magazine. A world where people like me didn't belong. Everyone except one woman. Florence's words echoed in my head, making my cheeks burn with humiliation. How many years had I endured her attacks, her passive aggression, her contempt? Always for Meredith's sake, always for Everett's sake. But today, something inside me broke. Or maybe it was the opposite. Something straightened out, uncoiled like a steel spring that had been compressed for too long. I walked to the end of the block and stopped at the wrought iron gate that separated this little piece of paradise from the rest of the world. Beyond it was a normal street with normal houses where normal people lived. Not the Texas aristocracy, as Florence liked to call herself. I could have taken a taxi home and spent the evening in silence, drowning my hurt feelings in a glass of wine. But my car was still at the Peyton house, and I had to go back for it. I leaned against the gate, wondering if I should wait there until most of the guests had left so as not to attract attention when I picked up my car. Then my phone rang in my pocket. I took it out, expecting to see Meredith's name, but it was an unfamiliar number. "This is Jeanette Torrens," I answered in the formal tone I used for work calls. "Mrs. Torrens?" "This is Chloe, Florence Peyton's assistant," a young woman's voice said. "Mrs. Peyton asked me to tell you that you forgot your car and would like to know when you plan to pick it up." I felt a wave of anger rise inside me. Even now, Florence couldn't resist taking a jab. She sent her assistant to remind me about the car, even though I had only left 15 minutes ago. "Tell Mrs. Peyton I'm on my way back to get the car," I replied coldly. "I'll be there in 5 minutes." I hung up without waiting for a reply and turned back toward the house. Now I walked faster, more determined, with my back straight and my chin up. If this was going to be my final confrontation with Florence, I wasn't going to let her see my weakness. But I hadn't taken 20 steps when I heard the rapid patter of children's feet and heavy breathing behind me. "Grandma! Grandma Jeanette!" Everett shouted, running toward me as fast as he could. I turned around and froze in surprise. My grandson, still in his holiday suit but without his bow tie, was running down the street, clutching a backpack with a picture of a space rocket on it to his chest. His blonde hair was tousled, his face flushed from running, and his eyes were wide and determined. "Everett?" I rushed toward him. "What are you doing? Why aren't you at the party?" He ran up to me and stopped, trying to catch his breath. Tears glistened on his cheeks, but there was no sadness in his eyes, only a desperate determination. "I'm leaving with you," he said as soon as he could speak. "I don't want to stay there without you." I crouched down to be at the same level as him. "Sweetie, you can't just leave. It's your birthday, and all your guests are here for you. Your parents will be worried." "I don't care," he said stubbornly, pursing his lips like a grown-up. "I heard what Grandma Florence said. It wasn't nice. Teacher Miranda says you shouldn't say bad things about other people, especially in front of everyone. It's called," he frowned, trying to remember the word, "bullying." I felt my heart tighten with tenderness and sadness at the same time. An 8-year-old child understood what adults couldn't or wouldn't understand. "You're right, sweetie. I said softly, but sometimes adults do and say the wrong things. That doesn't mean you have to run away from home. I'm not running away, Everett objected with the logic only children can muster. I'm coming with you. You're my real family. You never make me be someone else. With you, I can talk about coins and books and numbers and everything that interests me. But at home, his voice faltered. At home, I always have to be right. I hugged him, feeling his small body tremble beneath my arms. He smelled of children's shampoo, chocolate cake, and something else. That special smell of childhood that is impossible to describe, but that every mother and grandmother recognizes. I took the most important things, Everett continued, pointing to his backpack. Our coin collection, the photo of you and me at the aquarium, and Mr. Cookie. Mr. Cookie was a worn teddy bear I had given Everett on his 3rd birthday. Florence constantly tried to get rid of this dirty toy, but Everett threw such a tantrum every time that even the Iron Lady backed down. Everett, listen to me. I stepped back and looked him in the eyes. I love you very much, and I'm glad you want to be with me. But you can't just leave your parents. They love you, and they'll be very worried. Mom can come visit us, he suggested with childlike innocence. And Dad's always at work anyway. The last sentence sounded so calm and matter-of-fact that my heart sank again. How much children see and understand, even when we think we are protecting them from adult problems. Your mom will be very upset if you leave, I tried again, and Grandma Florence too. Grandma Florence will be upset that I've disgraced the Peyton name, he imitated his other grandmother's intonation with surprising accuracy. She always says that when I do something wrong. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My little grandson already understood too well the falsehood and conventions of the world in which he was growing up. Let's go sit down for a minute. I took him by the hand and led him to the nearest bench by a neat fence. Let's talk like adults. Everett nodded seriously and climbed onto the bench, placing his backpack next to him. I sat down beside him, wondering how to explain the complexity of the situation to an 8-year-old. You know that your mother is my daughter, I began. I love her more than anything in the world, just as your mother loves you. Loves. And even when we disagree with each other, even when we're sad or hurt, that love doesn't go away. But then why does Mom let Grandma Florence say those things to you, Everett asked with unchildlike insight. If someone said something bad about my mom, I would defend her. I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. Adult relationships can be very complicated, Everett. Sometimes the people we love make choices that we don't understand or that hurt us. Your mom wants everyone to be happy, and sometimes that's not possible. But she only makes Grandma Florence happy, he insisted, and you get sad. I can see it, even when you're smiling. I looked at my grandson in surprise. When did he become so observant? Sometimes you have to make choices, Everett. And your mother chose the family she created with your father. And I choose you, he said simply, taking my hand. You taught me that real treasures aren't the ones that shine the brightest. And a real family isn't the one with the biggest house or the most expensive cars. I felt a lump rise in my throat. My own words, which I had once said to him when explaining the value of old coins, now came back to me in this childish but determined voice. I want to live with you, Grandma, Everett continued, at least for a little while. Then I can come back if they get better. Sweetheart, it's not that simple, I tried to say calmly, even though his words were turning my stomach. There are laws about where children have to live. And your parents have the right to decide. What about my rights? He interrupted me. We learned about children's rights in school. I have the right to be happy. I looked at this little man with amazement and pride. There was so much of me in him, the stubbornness, the determination, the ability to stand up for himself, traits that Florence had tried to eradicate from him with her real Peyton upbringing. Let's do this, I suggested after a pause. We'll go back to your party now. You apologize to your parents for leaving without warning, and I'll talk to your mom. Maybe we can work something out so you can spend more time with me, like staying for the weekend or even a week during the holidays. Everett thought about it, fiddling with the strap of his backpack. What if they don't agree? What if Grandma Florence says again that you're not allowed to see me? Then we'll think of something else, I promised, although I had no idea what that might be. But your parents must be worried sick right now. We should get back. Everett nodded, but without much enthusiasm. Okay, but I'll tell them I want to spend more time with you, and that I don't want Grandma Florence to say bad things about you. Just please be polite about it, I asked, imagining Florence's reaction to such a statement. Remember that? I didn't have time to finish my sentence before Garrison's car came flying around the corner. An expensive black SUV that he had replaced last year with an even more expensive model. The car screeched to a halt beside us, and my brother-in-law jumped out, pale and distraught. "Everett!" he exclaimed, rushing toward his son. "Thank God you're okay." Meredith followed him out of the car, her face frozen in a mixture of horror and relief. "Mom?" She looked from Everett to me. "What's going on?" I stood up, feeling my knees begin to tremble. "Everett was upset about what happened and decided to come with me," I said as calmly as I could. We were just about to head back. "You left the party and took our son with you?" Harrison's voice was filled with disbelief and growing anger. "I didn't take him," I insisted firmly. "He ran after me, and like I said, we were on our way back." "Dad, it's true," Everett chimed in. "I left on my own. Grandma Jeanette didn't do anything." Garrison crouched down in front of his son and put his hands on his shoulders. "Everett, do you have any idea how scared we were? All the guests are looking for you. Your grandmother is hysterical. How could you just leave without saying a word? How could you let him go?" Meredith turned to me, her eyes full of tears and accusation. "Mom, what were you thinking?" "I already explained, Meredith," I said, feeling irritation rising inside me. "I didn't let him leave. He found me and we were just discussing going back." "After you made a scene and left the party," Garrison's voice sounded accusatory. "You didn't even think about how it would affect the child." "I didn't make a scene." I tried to speak quietly so Everett wouldn't hear, but the anger seeped through my words. "Your mother publicly humiliated me in front of all the guests and in front of my grandson." "Grandma Florence said some bad things," Everett said, supporting me. "She hurt Grandma Jeanette." Meredith and Garrison exchanged glances that showed their confusion. "Everett, get in the car," Garrison finally said. "We need to go back. The guests are waiting." "I don't want to go back." Everett crossed his arms over his chest. "I want to stay with Grandma Jeanette." "That's not up for discussion." Garrison's voice grew harder. "Get in the car. Now." I saw Everett's face change. Stubbornness gave way to fear, then resignation. He turned to me, his eyes pleading for help. "Go, sweetie," I said softly. "Everything will be all right. We'll talk later." "Promise?" he whispered. "I promise," I said, leaning down to kiss his forehead. Everett reluctantly walked to the car, clutching his backpack tightly. "Mom," Meredith came up to me as Garrison led his son to the car. "I don't know what happened between you and Florence, but please don't drag Everett into this. He's a child. He shouldn't have to choose sides." "He didn't choose, Meredith," I said wearily. "He just saw injustice and reacted the way he thought was right, unlike some adults." My daughter's cheeks flushed. "What do you want me to do? Get up and start yelling at my husband's mother in the middle of a holiday? I wanted you to stand up for your mother, at least once in all these years." My voice faltered, but I guess that's too much to ask of a daughter I raised on my own, working 2 jobs to give her the best education and the best opportunities. Meredith recoiled as if I had hit her. "That's not fair, Mom." "It's not fair," I agreed, like so many things in life. "Meredith!" Garrison called from the car. "We have to get back." My daughter took one last look at me, a mixture of hurt, guilt, and irritation. "We'll talk about this later," she said, "when everyone has calmed down." "Sure," I nodded, not believing a word of it. I watched as the black SUV turned and drove away toward the Peyton mansion. In the rear window, I saw Everett's face pressed against the glass, his hand raised in a farewell gesture. I waved back, feeling tears finally break through the barrier of self-control. When the car disappeared around the corner, I sank back down onto the bench, suddenly feeling how tired I was. All the strength that had kept me upright suddenly evaporated, leaving only emptiness and exhaustion. I took out my phone and automatically dialed the number I knew by heart. "Sheldon Bright here," a familiar voice answered. "Sheldon, it's Jeanette," I said, not recognizing my own voice. Sorry to call on your day off, but I need help. Jeanette, what's wrong? His voice sounded genuinely concerned. Are you okay? Not really, I said, taking a deep breath. I'm in the Highland Park area near my daughter's house. My car is there, but I can't go back there, not now. Stay where you are, he said firmly. I'll come and get you. Give me the exact address. I gave him the street name and approximate location. Sheldon, I added after a pause. I don't just need a ride. I need advice. I think I just made a big mistake. Or maybe it's the opposite. I fixed a mistake I've been making for years. Tell me when I get there, he said gently. Hang in there, Jeanette. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I turned off my phone and looked at the empty street. The sun was setting, painting the perfect houses and perfect lawns in golden hues. Music was playing somewhere in the distance. Everett's party must be still going on, without me. I imagined Florence reassuring the guests, explaining my departure and Everett's disappearance with some convenient lie. How Meredith would smile stiffly, pretending everything was fine. How Garrison would whisper something in his business partner's ears, perhaps apologizing for his eccentric mother-in-law, and Everett sitting among a pile of gifts he didn't want, wishing he was somewhere far away. What had I done? Did I have the right to interfere in my daughter's life, even if I thought she was making a mistake? Did I have the right to influence Everett by instilling ideas that went against his parents' values? And what would I do now that the bridges seemed to be burned beyond repair? All these questions swirled around in my head as I waited for Sheldon, sitting on a bench in an upscale neighborhood of Dallas where I had never belonged. Sheldon drove me home in his comfortable Cadillac, listening to my rambling account of what had happened at Everett's birthday party. He didn't interrupt, just nodded occasionally and frowned, gripping the steering wheel more tightly. When we got to my apartment on the 9th floor of a high-rise in downtown Dallas, it was already completely dark. Are you staying? I asked, turning on the light in the hallway. I can make some coffee. Coffee would be nice, Sheldon agreed, following me into the living room. My apartment was the complete opposite of the Peyton home, small but functional, with a minimalist design and bookshelves instead of expensive knickknacks. Here, I felt like myself, Jeanette Torrens, financial analyst, a woman who had achieved everything on her own, not a not-good-enough mother and grandmother. You know, Sheldon said, taking a cup of coffee and settling into a chair, I've always thought you put up with too much from the Peytons, especially that snooty lady, your daughter's mother-in-law. I did it for Meredith, I replied, sitting down opposite him. She wanted so much to be part of their world. And now? I paused, staring into the black depths of my coffee. Now, I'm not sure I did the right thing. Maybe I should have stood up to them sooner. Shown Meredith that you can love your husband without losing yourself in his family. Sheldon nodded, his intelligent eyes looking at me with understanding. So, what are you going to do now? I don't know, I admitted honestly. Meredith must be angry with me. Harrison probably thinks I was trying to turn Everett against them. And Florence, I smiled grimly. Florence must be gloating. She always said I was a bad influence on the boy. What about Everett himself? Sheldon asked. The thought of my grandson made my heart ache. He wanted to come with me. He said I was his real family, I said, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. You know what's ironic? All these years, I was afraid of losing touch with Meredith and Everett, so I let Florence and Harrison walk all over me. And in the end, it was my silence and submission that may have destroyed that connection for good. We sat in silence, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. Sheldon stared thoughtfully out the window at the Dallas night, while I tried to piece together my scattered thoughts. Maybe there's still a way out of this, he finally said. Give Meredith some time to cool off, then talk to her, just her without Garrison and his mother. Remind her of who she was before she became Mrs. Peyton. Do you think she still remembers? I asked bitterly. Of course she does, Sheldon said confidently. Beneath all that veneer of glamour and social convention, there's still the girl who wrote a feminist essay at a conservative college and made her professor apologize to the class. I smiled, remembering the incident. Meredith was 19 at the time, and even then she showed the independent thinking and strength of character that I was so proud of. She's changed, Sheldon. We all change. We change, but we don't lose ourselves completely. he objected. Somewhere deep down, Meredith is still the brave girl you raised. I wanted to believe him, but doubts plagued me. Too many years had passed, and the Peyton influence was too strong. In any case, I said, finishing my coffee, I'll return my resignation tomorrow. I'll need something to occupy myself if they decide to restrict my contact with Everett. My office door is always open to you, Sheldon said softly, and not just my office. I looked up, surprised by this admission. In the 20 years of our friendship and collaboration, there had always been a certain unspoken understanding between us, a quiet realization that under different circumstances, in another life, we could have been more than colleagues. Thank you, I replied quietly. It means a lot to me. When Sheldon left, promising to call tomorrow, I sat in the dark living room for a long time, looking at the lights of the city. The phone was silent. No call from Meredith, no messages. I wondered what was happening at the Peyton house. Was the party over? What were the guests talking about? What did they say to Everett? Had they put him to bed, or was he lying awake thinking about our conversation and what had happened? At some point, exhaustion got the better of me, and I dozed off in the chair. I was awakened by a loud knock at the door. It was almost midnight. I got up, my heart pounding. Who could be coming at this hour? When I opened the door, I saw Meredith, her hair disheveled, her eyes red from crying, and a look of despair on her face. "Mom, what have you done?" she blurted out as she rushed into the apartment. "Meredith? What happened?" I closed the door behind her, feeling a growing sense of alarm. "Everett is missing," she said, her voice breaking. "We put him to bed after the party, and when I went to check on him before going to bed, he wasn't in his room. The window is open, and there's a note on his bed that says, 'I've gone to find my real family.'" I froze, stunned. "Do you think he came to me? Where else would he go?" Her voice was accusatory. "After everything you told him about real treasures and real families." "Meredith," I tried to speak calmly, "Everett isn't here. I haven't seen or heard anyone." Her face contorted with fear. "Then where is he? It's nighttime. He's 8 years old." "Did you call the police?" "Garrison is calling right now, and his father is pulling some strings at the department." She paced nervously around the room. "Mom, if something happens to him—" "Nothing will happen to him," I said firmly, even though I was panicking myself. "Everett is a smart boy. He won't go with strangers or run across busy roads." "How do you know?" Meredith cried. "You see him once a month if you're lucky?" Her words hit me like a slap in the face. "And whose fault is that?" I asked quietly. "Do you think I don't want to see my only grandson more often, to spend more time with him? Be part of his life?" "Mom, don't start," Meredith said wearily, running her hand through her hair. "This isn't the time for this conversation." "When is the time, Meredith?" I felt years of pent-up irritation welling up inside me. When Florence deigns to give us permission to be honest? Or when Garrison is in the mood to hear anything other than praise for his family? "Don't bring Garrison into this," Meredith snapped. "He's a good father and husband." "I don't doubt that," I agreed, "but he and his family have turned my daughter into a shadow of herself, a woman who doesn't dare defend her own mother when she's being publicly humiliated." Meredith froze in the middle of the room, her shoulders slumping. "What do you want from me, Mom? For me to cause a scene at my own son's birthday party? To fight with my husband's family, who are crucial to Harrison's career? To destroy everything we've worked so hard to build over the years? I want you to be happy," I said simply, "and I want you to remember who you really are." "Who do you think I am?" Her voice sounded tired. "A brave, intelligent, independent woman," I replied without hesitation. "A woman who wasn't afraid to stand up for what she believed in, who dreamed of changing the world, not just fitting into it." Meredith sank down onto the sofa, suddenly looking much older than her years. "People change, Mom. I've grown up. I have a family, responsibilities." "Responsibilities don't have to mean losing yourself," I said gently, sitting down next to her. "When your father died, I was left with responsibilities too, a young daughter, a mortgage, the need to work 2 jobs. But I never let circumstances dictate who I am inside." Meredith was silent for a long time, staring at one spot. Then she said quietly, "Sometimes I miss the girl I was before I got married, the one who could say what she thought without fear of judgment, the one who laughed loudly and didn't watch her every move. I gently took her hand. She's still here, Meredith, just hidden deep inside. Florence isn't a bad person, Mom, Meredith said after a pause. She's just from a different world, with different values, different ideas about what a family should be. I know, I nodded. But that doesn't give her the right to put other people down, especially in front of their grandchildren. What she said at the party, Meredith faltered. It was cruel. I should have said something. I wanted to, but I just froze. As always. Why, Meredith? I looked into her eyes. Why do you let them dictate how you live your life, how to raise your son, how to treat your own mother? She turned away, but I caught the tears in her eyes. Because I'm afraid, she whispered, afraid that I won't fit in, that Garrison will realize he made a mistake marrying a middle-class girl with no connections or status, that Everett will be deprived of the opportunities the Peyton family can provide. Meredith, I gently turned her face toward me. Garrison married you because he loved you, the real you, not the version his mother approved of. And as for Everett, I paused. Are you sure all those opportunities are worth making a child feel like he has to run away from home in search of a real family? Those words seemed to hit home. Meredith flinched and covered her face with her hands. I ruined everything, didn't I? She asked hoarsely. I wanted to give my son the best, and instead... I hugged her, feeling her shoulders shake. You haven't ruined anything, I said. You love your son, and he knows that. Maybe it's just time to rethink some priorities. We sat there for several minutes, hugging each other as we hadn't done in years. Suddenly, Meredith's phone rang, making us both jump. It's Garrison, she said, looking at the screen, and answered, Yes? What? Thank God. Where was he? What? Oh. Yes, I'm at my mom's. Tell him I'll be there soon. And kiss him for me. She hung up and turned to me with a look of relief on her face. Everett's home. They found him in a neighbor's yard, in a treehouse. He said he wanted to come to your place, but he wasn't sure where you lived, so he decided to spend the night there and ask for directions in the morning. I exhaled, feeling the tension leave my body. Thank God he's okay. He told Garrison he wouldn't come home until we let him see you more often, Meredith continued with a nervous laugh. And until Grandma Florence apologizes for saying bad things about his beloved Grandma Jeanette. I couldn't help smiling at the image of my little grandson issuing ultimatums to adults. And what did Garrison say? He said we were just discussing how to arrange for you and Everett to spend more time together, Meredith said, looking at me questioningly. That's true, isn't it? I nodded, feeling warmth spread through my chest. If that's what you really want. I do, she said firmly. Everett loves you, Mom. And I do too, even if I haven't always shown it in recent years. I know, sweetheart. I hugged her again. I love you too. I always have and always will, no matter what happens. Meredith straightened up and wiped away her tears. I have to get back. Everett won't go to bed until he knows you're okay. Tell him I love him and I'm proud of his courage, I said, and that we'll definitely see each other on the weekend. Definitely. Meredith stood up but paused at the door. Mom, about what happened today, I'll talk to Florence. She needs to apologize to you. I'm not sure Florence Peyton knows how to do that, I said skeptically, shaking my head. Then she'll have to learn, Meredith said with a determination I hadn't heard in years. Because I won't let anyone, not even her, destroy our family. When the door closed behind Meredith, I stood in the hallway for a long time, trying to make sense of what had happened. In one day, my whole world seemed to have been turned upside down. I left my grandson's birthday party, leaving the house key with my daughter, thinking it was the end. Instead, it might have been the beginning of something new, the beginning of my real daughter's return and the strengthening of my bond with my grandson. Of course, I wasn't deluding myself. There were still many difficult conversations and awkward moments ahead. Florence wouldn't give up easily, and Garrison probably wouldn't be thrilled about the changes. But today, for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. I returned to the living room and walked over to the window. Dallas shone brightly at night, as beautiful as ever, and indifferent to the small dramas of human beings. Somewhere out there, in one of those luxurious houses, my grandson was waiting for his mother to return, to find out that his grandmother was all right, that she loved him and would never disappear from his life. And for the first time in many years, I thought that maybe I wouldn't have to choose between work and family, between my own independence and the love of my loved ones. Maybe it was possible to find a balance where there was room for everything that was important. I took out my phone and wrote a short message to Sheldon. "Everything is working out. I'll tell you tomorrow. Thanks for your support." His reply came almost instantly. "Always here when you need me. Looking forward to hearing all about it tomorrow. Maybe over dinner?" I smiled and replied, "I'd love to." Life went on, and perhaps it was better than I dared hope. 3 months later, I was setting the table in my apartment when the doorbell rang. A second later, I heard Everett's familiar voice. "Grandma, it's us. Hurry up and open the door. We have a surprise for you." I smiled and went to open the door. My grandson stood in the doorway with a big smile, holding a paper bag. Behind him were Meredith and Garrison, both a little embarrassed, but smiling. "Come in," I said, stepping aside to let them into the apartment. "Dinner's almost ready." Everett rushed past me first, heading straight for the table where we usually looked at our coin collection. "Grandma, look what I found!" He took an old coin out of the bag. "It's a silver dollar from 1874. Dad helped me buy it at an online auction." I looked at Harrison in surprise, and he shrugged with a slightly embarrassed smile. "It turns out it's pretty fun to track down rare coins and bid on them," he said. Who would have thought? A lot has changed in the last 3 months. After the incident at Everett's birthday party and his escape, Meredith finally found the strength to talk to Florence. Really talk, not just listen to her opinion. The conversation was difficult, with tears and raised voices, as my daughter later told me. But in the end, Florence reluctantly agreed to reconsider her attitude toward me and my role in Everett's life. Of course, she didn't apologize, at least not directly. But when I arrived at the Peyton house for Sunday dinner the next time, it had become a weekly tradition. Florence greeted me without her usual cold contempt. She even asked me to share the recipe for the lemon cake I had baked, a small but meaningful gesture on her part. Garrison had changed too. Perhaps the shock of his son's escape had caused him to reevaluate some of his priorities. Or maybe he just saw how important my relationship with Everett was to him. In any case, he began to take more interest in his son's hobbies, including our coin collection, and even offered to join us on a trip to the Numismatic Museum once. But the biggest changes were in Meredith. As if awakening from a long sleep, she began to return to her former self, the girl who wasn't afraid to speak her mind and stand up for her values. She signed up for the photography classes she had dreamed of taking for years, but had put off because of what she considered an inappropriate hobby for a Peyton wife. She started wearing brighter clothes, laughing louder, and speaking with more confidence. Most importantly, she began to set boundaries with Florence, politely but firmly, letting her know that certain decisions regarding Everett's upbringing would be made only by her and Harrison. As for me, I did withdraw my resignation, but I accepted Sheldon's offer of part-time work. 3 days a week, I consulted with major clients, and the rest of the time I devoted to myself and my family. Now on Wednesdays, Everett came to my place after school, and we did his homework together, studied coins, or just walked around town. And every other Sunday, the whole family gathered at my place for dinner, a tradition that started spontaneously and turned into something everyone looked forward to. "It smells delicious," Meredith said, helping me set the table. "What did you make?" "Your grandmother's roast," I replied. "Remember how she used to make it every Christmas?" "Of course I do." Meredith's eyes softened with fond memories. "I haven't had roast like that since." "Grandma," Everett ran up to us. "Can we watch that movie about pirate treasure after dinner? You promised last time." "Of course you can." I ruffled his hair. "If your parents don't mind." "Why would they?" Harrison smiled, coming over to us. "It's not a school day tomorrow, so you can stay up late." The doorbell rang again. "That must be Sheldon," I said, heading for the door. Over the past few months, our relationship with Sheldon had moved to a new level. We weren't rushing to label it, but we were spending more and more time together, not just at the office, but outside of it as well. He often joined our family dinners, and Everett already called him Uncle Sheldon and loved listening to his stories about traveling around the world. When I opened the door, I saw Sheldon with a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing me on the cheek. "I was stuck in traffic." "You're just in time," I smiled, accepting the flowers. "The roast is just ready." We went into the living room where Everett had already seated everyone at the table and was laying out the napkins with an air of importance. "Uncle Sheldon!" he exclaimed when he saw the new guest. "I found a silver dollar from 1874. Would you like to see it?" "Certainly, young man," nodded Sheldon. "But perhaps we should eat first. I hear your grandmother has prepared something special." When everyone sat down at the table, I looked around at the gathering and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. My daughter, looking like her true self again, with a sparkle in her eyes and a sincere smile. My son-in-law, who it turned out could be quite a pleasant person when he wasn't under pressure from his mother. My grandson, a smart and sensitive boy who had somehow become the catalyst for all these changes. And Sheldon, reliable, understanding, and an unexpected but important addition to our little family. "What shall we drink to?" Garrison asked as Sheldon poured the wine into glasses. "To family," I suggested, raising my glass, "to real values and real treasures." "To family," everyone echoed, and even Everett raised his glass of apple juice. Looking at them all, I thought about how far we had come in those 3 months. From misunderstanding and alienation to acceptance and warmth. Of course, not all problems had been solved. Florence was still Florence, albeit a more reserved version of herself. Meredith still wavered at times between her newfound confidence and her old habit of trying to please everyone around her. And Garrison glanced at his watch from time to time during our family gatherings, thinking about work. But the important thing was that we were together. We talked to each other, listened and heard. We learned to accept our differences and appreciate what made each of us special. We were becoming a real family. Not perfect, not without problems, but alive and real. And when I looked at Everett's face as he excitedly told Sheldon about his new discovery, I knew that all my years of patience, all the tears and hurt, all the moments of doubt had been worth it. Worth the chance to be here, now, with the people I loved most in the world. After all, as I once told Everett, real treasures aren't the ones that shine the brightest. Real treasures are the time we spend with those we love. No amount of money, status, or social standing can compare to that.